In 336 BC, in Corinth, the air was thick with dust kicked up by soldiers' sandals, and the scent of sun-baked stone hung heavy. Alexander, the 20-year-old conqueror of the world, surrounded by his retinue, approached a man who was already 71 years old. This man was Diogenes, the penniless philosopher, resting in his clay jar. Tension mounted. The most powerful ruler on earth addressed a man who possessed absolutely nothing. Alexander offered him any reward, saying, "Ask for anything you wish." A pause followed. Then Diogenes uttered a phrase that would echo through history: "Stand out of my sunlight." His retinue was stunned, expecting humble pleas for gold or land. But Alexander's reaction was even more astonishing. It wasn't anger, but pure admiration. He turned to his generals and declared, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." What did the world's most powerful man see in this penniless philosopher? This paradox uncovers two fundamental questions. First, why do scientific studies show that multi-million-dollar lottery winners, individuals who've gained an absolute advantage, are no happier than ordinary people just 1 year later? Research confirms their happiness levels are indistinguishable from those of people paralyzed in an accident. Gaining everything guarantees nothing. We will find the answer to this in the second section. The second question, which brings us back to the scene in Corinth, is, how could Diogenes, an utterly vulnerable beggar, not only refuse, but publicly defy Alexander the Great? Anyone else in his position would have begged for mercy. What gave him such inner strength? We will get the answer to this in the sixth section. Both questions are linked by a single idea. There are invisible laws of psychology more powerful than money and authority. This video is a guide to using them. We are making a contract with you. Right now, you are likely in a constant race for goals. Your self-esteem depends on others' opinions, and the future causes anxiety over things you cannot control. This is a state of slavery to your own desires and the external world. By the end of this video, you will gain access to a mental operating system used by Roman emperors to manage their empire and by ancient philosophers to achieve unshakable tranquility. This is not esotericism, but a concrete set of psychological tools. You will understand that true strength is not the ability to get everything you want, but the ability to want nothing superfluous. This is the code of invulnerability. This system works like the changing seasons. Instead of fighting the winter of uncontrollable events, you learn to use it for rest and preparation for the spring of your controllable actions. You will stop being a slave to your desires and become the architect of your inner fortress. Here is your roadmap to inner freedom. We will follow a clear route where each stage will give you a specific tool. There are 3 key markers on this map. The first marker, in just 4 minutes, we will expose a scientific trap in your brain that is currently making you run in place in pursuit of happiness. This knowledge is the first step to getting off that treadmill. The second marker, at approximately the 11-minute mark, you will receive a personal blueprint for an inner citadel from the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. This is the protocol he used to maintain mental clarity amid the chaos of war. And the third marker, closer to the end, at the 19-minute mark, we will look under the hood of your brain. We will see how these practices physically rewire neural networks to give you true biological freedom from destructive desires. Each element is part of a single system, so stay with us until the end. We begin with a paradox that shatters all modern logic of success. How can the brain of a multimillionaire lottery winner show the same level of happiness as the brain of someone paralyzed in an accident, just 1 year later? Science calls this hedonic adaptation. Your brain quickly adjusts to any new level of pleasure, whether it's a new car or a promotion, and establishes it as the new norm. This is an ancient survival mechanism that, in the modern world, has become a weapon against you. But here's what textbooks hide. This brain vulnerability is the foundation of the entire consumer economy. Corporations know that the effect of a purchase will be temporary. They sell you the next dose to keep you running. This isn't a bug in your system, but a feature that's being exploited. You are on a hedonic treadmill, running faster and faster, but staying in place. You are doomed to run forever unless you find a way to get off. Where did the belief that our ancestors were unhappier than us come from? Over the past 50 years, per capita GDP in developed countries has tripled. Yet, the proportion of people who consider themselves very happy has not increased. It has even decreased. It seems we've simply reached a satisfaction plateau. However, the reality is different. Over the same period, the curve of diagnosed anxiety disorders and consumer debt levels have soared vertically. We are not just failing to become happier. We are becoming poorer and more anxious in pursuit of an illusion. Remember the joy of buying your latest smartphone. Did it last a week? A month? But you'll pay for it for a year. This gap between fleeting pleasure and long-term commitment is the factory of your anxiety. It's a trap built into our culture. But the key to breaking it was found 2,000 years ago. Consider John's story. He did everything right. Got an education, found a prestigious job, bought a house. He won the game called life, but felt utterly empty. Every goal achieved, from his first paycheck to a promotion, brought only brief relief, followed by a new, even higher bar. His brain simply demanded more. But the problem wasn't with John. It was with the dream itself. Millions of people, like him, are in the same cage, considering themselves personal failures. In reality, they are perfect soldiers of consumer society. One day, John stumbled upon a quote from Seneca, the wealthiest man in Rome. "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." At that moment, he understood everything. He had been trying to solve an internal problem with external tools. So, we have scientifically proven that the pursuit of desires is a dead end. It is an outward path that leads nowhere. We have diagnosed our cultural ailment. But what if the entire strategy is fundamentally flawed? What if the key to happiness is not in adding, but in subtracting? There is an inward path, a way to build a source of tranquility that does not depend on winning the lottery, the boss's opinion, or social media likes. Something that cannot be taken from you. Marcus Aurelius, a man who had absolutely everything, power, wealth, fame, sought strength not in these things. In the harsh conditions of a military campaign, he created blueprints for an impregnable fortress, a fortress within your mind. How could Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, leading a brutal war on the empire's borders, write a diary full of astonishing serenity every night in a cold tent? A man at the epicenter of chaos possessed absolute inner order. The foundation of his citadel was a single principle the Stoics called the dichotomy of control. All events in the world fall into two categories: what is within our power and what is not. Within our power are our thoughts, reactions, and decisions. Not within our power is everything else. But here's what sources hide. 99% of your anxiety, stress, and anger are caused by attempts to control the uncontrollable, the opinions of other people, currency exchange rates, traffic jams. We spend almost all our mental energy trying to change by sheer willpower what cannot be changed. As Epictetus said, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. This sounds simple, but how do you apply it when the world is falling apart? The Stoics had a protocol. Recall the last thing that upset you this morning. What percentage of it was entirely within your control? Stoics used a simple exercise, a mental sheet of paper divided into 2 columns. On the left, I can control. On the right, I cannot control. Criticism from your boss? Their words and mood are on the right. Your reaction, your work on mistakes, your decision on how to perceive it are on the left. This is not a call to passivity. On the contrary, it is an act of surgical precision. You stop wasting energy on meaningless struggles and direct 100% of your resources where they can make a difference. A traffic jam? Uncontrollable. The fact of the jam itself. Controllable. Your reaction. You can spend an hour in anger or an hour listening to a useful podcast. The choice is yours. But what if the problem isn't a traffic jam, but a real disaster? For that, you need the next level of training. How did American pilot James Stockdale survive 7.5 years in a Vietnamese prisoner of war camp, enduring regular torture? He studied the writings of the Stoic Epictetus. In captivity, the dichotomy of control became his sole tool for survival. He couldn't control the actions of his captors, the pain, or the conditions of his imprisonment. But he had 100% control over his inner world, his reactions, his principles, his dignity. And he didn't just survive. He organized resistance, developed a communication system for prisoners, and maintained their morale. His inner citadel became a fortress for dozens of other people. He spent 2,740 days in captivity, over 400 of them in solitary confinement, yet never divulged critical information to the enemy. Stockdale used Stoicism for defense, but there was a man who turned this philosophy into an offensive weapon. What is stronger? A fortress that can withstand any blow, or one that an enemy cannot even hit because it has nothing to lose? Until now, we have been learning to build an inner citadel to defend against the blows of fate. We learned to endure the storm, remaining unharmed inside. But what if we go further? Instead of waiting for a blow, what if we purposefully train ourselves by making our lives more difficult in small ways? Voluntarily stepping into a small storm every day so that a real hurricane feels like a gentle breeze. This is a shift from defense to offense. Diogenes did not build a citadel. He lived outside, exposed to all winds, and laughed at them. He pushed the idea of invulnerability to its logical limit. We are moving from defense to attack. The next section is about the weapon Diogenes forged. Why did Diogenes embrace icy bronze statues in winter and roll in hot sand in summer? From the outside, it looked like pure madness. But it wasn't torture, it was calibration. He deliberately exposed himself to small, controlled doses of suffering to build immunity to the uncontrollable blows of fate. This was psychological vaccination. Our culture of toxic comfort makes the psyche as fragile as a greenhouse plant. The slightest inconvenience is perceived as a tragedy. Diogenes, however, intentionally built calluses on his will. Initially, any strain causes pain, but over time, the skin hardens and becomes invulnerable to what once hurt it. He vaccinated himself against cold and heat. But his most powerful weapon was related to giving up things. One day, Diogenes saw a boy drinking water from his cupped hands. Without hesitation, he smashed his only bowl, which was almost all his possessions, and said, "The boy has surpassed me in simplicity." At first glance, it's the rejection of an object. In reality, it's an act of liberation. Everything you own also owns you. It demands care and breeds fear of loss. By getting rid of the bowl, Diogenes cut another thread by which the world could pull him. He became not poorer, but stronger. And he did it publicly, turning his life into a philosophical performance. By the way, he didn't live in a barrel. He lived in a pythos, a huge clay jar for grain. It was a shelter that couldn't be burned, wasn't ashamed to abandon, and demonstrated absolute freedom. This principle of letting go of the superfluous has now received scientific validation. What do Special Forces training and Silicon Valley biohackers practicing ice baths have in common? They voluntarily embrace discomfort. Science calls this hormesis, a biological principle where small doses of stress make the body stronger. Just as muscles grow from micro-tears during exercise, the psyche strengthens from overcoming difficulties. Research shows that just 2 minutes in icy water can increase dopamine levels by 250% for several hours. Practices that Diogenes intuitively discovered 2,400 years ago are now at the core of high-performance psychology. The mental analog of his asceticism is Stoic negative visualization. By imagining the worst-case scenario, you pre-vaccinate yourself against shock. But before training the mind, you need to clear the space in which it operates. What do your cluttered closet and your background anxiety have in common? We've learned that voluntary discomfort is training. Diogenes took this idea to the extreme by getting rid of almost everything. For us, this seems impossible, but the key lies in one simple shift, from giving up everything to giving up the superfluous. This makes his radical idea accessible to everyone. Partially applying his philosophy to your home can profoundly change your consciousness. The modern name for this practice is minimalism. It's not about poverty, but about mindfulness. This is the first step to putting Diogenes' weapon into practice. Prepare for an operation to declutter your home and your mind. The next section is the instruction. The self-storage industry in the U.S., where people pay to not see their clutter, generates more revenue than the entire Hollywood film industry. This isn't just a statistic, it's a diagnosis. Every item in your field of vision is an unfinished microtask for your brain. This needs to be put away. This needs to be fixed. I haven't used this in ages. Your brain constantly scans this visual noise. But the real scale of the problem is hidden. The average American home contains about 300,000 items. It's not a home, it's a warehouse. Your brain is constantly trying to manage the cognitive equivalent of a small city made of your own junk. 1/4 of Americans with a 2-car garage don't even have room for 1 car in it. This is a mental prison you've built for yourself, item by item. But there's a way to escape. Why do you feel incredible mental clarity after a thorough cleaning? This isn't psychology, it's physiology. Visual clutter directly overloads your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for concentration and decision-making. But there's also a hormonal trace. Research from the University of California has shown a direct link between cortisol levels, the primary stress hormone, and the number of items in a home. Your home is literally making you sick. Every untidy item acts like an unfinished task that constantly hangs in your brain's working memory, subject to the Zeigarnik effect. Your brain in a cluttered room is like a kitchen exhaust fan with a clogged filter. It hums with tension, works poorly, and wastes energy. But minimalism isn't just about things. The most complex clutter in our lives is unnecessary social connections. What compels thousands of successful professionals to sell their homes, shed their possessions, and become digital nomads with just one backpack? They are not getting rid of things, but of the mortgage on their attention that these things impose. Home maintenance, car repairs, and caring for hundreds of items steal their most valuable resources, time and mental energy. They trade material assets for freedom. A modern RV is ideologically the same as Diogenes' pythos. Its average area in the U.S. is 17 square meters, 13 times smaller than the average new home. This is almost an exact repetition of the proportion of Diogenes' shelter to the home of an Athenian citizen. This is not a symbol of poverty, but a manifesto of freedom. And this freedom from things yields an unexpected side effect: power over people. Why are we desperately afraid of the opinions of people we don't even like? And why do we buy things we don't need to impress them? We've cleared our physical space. That was the first, most obvious layer of servitude. But there's a deeper trap. Most things were bought not for us, but for others, for status, for approval. This is the tyranny of others' opinions. Neurobiologists have discovered that social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain. Your fear of judgment is a real, physiological reaction. A person who needs nothing from you, neither your approval, nor your money, nor your attention, possesses boundless power over you. This is Diogenes' secret. Now we will unravel the most counterintuitive paradox of social dynamics. Why, in any negotiation, from business to romantic, does the person who needs the outcome less almost always win? This reveals a fundamental law of human interaction. In any system, be it a pair of individuals or an entire corporation, the participant with the least emotional and material dependence on the outcome holds the most influence. The person willing to walk away from a deal dictates the terms. The partner unafraid of solitude sets the rules in a relationship. But this isn't a trick. It's a law of social physics. People are subconsciously drawn to self-sufficiency as a source of strength. Power is a byproduct of inner independence, not its goal. A self-sufficient person is like a massive object in space. They do not strive to attract, but their intrinsic mass causes smaller objects to orbit around them. This law was taken to its absolute extreme by a man whose encounter with the conqueror of the world became its classic example. So, let's return to Corinth. Alexander the Great offered Diogenes anything he desired. This was a standard power play Alexander had used thousands of times. But Diogenes' reply, "Stand out of my sunlight," broke the game. He was the only person on the planet who needed nothing from the emperor. Alexander wasn't enraged, he was astonished. He turned to his retinue and uttered the game-changing phrase, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." This is the answer to the question from the first section. Diogenes could act this way not out of pride, but out of total inner freedom, built through years of training. He needed only the warmth of the sun, a resource Alexander could neither give nor take away. His inner foundation proved stronger than all the armies in the world. Remember when you felt most powerful in an interaction, when you desperately wanted something from someone, or when you were absolutely ready to walk away? Why do desperate attempts to please almost always lead to the opposite effect? The superficial explanation is that neediness and fawning are off-putting. One simply needs to be more confident. But the brutal reality is, you cannot fake it. Your brain is a powerful transceiver, and the other person's brain is a hypersensitive receiver. Your inner insecurity screams louder than any words. This mechanism evolved over millions of years to determine status within a tribe. From this, a shocking conclusion follows. Stop trying to get approval, and you will get it. This paradox works only when you achieve a state of genuine disinterest in others' opinions. Your brain has a social immune system. It instantly recognizes another's need for approval as a virus of weakness and instinctively builds defenses. But how can you achieve this state if it's beyond conscious control? The answer lies deeper than psychology, at the hardware level of our brain. We've journeyed from ancient Greece to evolutionary psychology. We've uncovered the paradox of power. We've understood that the pursuit of desires is a hedonic treadmill. We've learned to build an inner citadel from the Stoics and train invulnerability through Diogenes' asceticism. But what if I told you that all this philosophy has a physical, measurable manifestation in the structure of your brain? All this time we've been talking about the software of our consciousness. But how will this affect the hardware, the brain itself? This brings us to the culmination of our investigation. The prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, synaptic connections. These are not just terms, they are the battlefield for your freedom. Ancient philosophers intuitively grasped methods of rewiring the brain. In the next section, we will arm ourselves with science and see exactly how this process works on a physical level. How can consciously abstaining from something, from dessert to social media, physically strengthen the most developed part of your brain? This is the neurobiological core of Diogenes' and the Stoics' philosophy. A constant war rages in your consciousness. On one side, the prefrontal cortex, your inner executive, responsible for willpower and long-term goals. On the other, the limbic system, the ancient emotional center, demanding immediate gratification. The modern world is a giant machine designed to weaken your executive and hyperstimulate the animal brain. Fast food, social media, notifications. These are direct dopamine injections that transfer power to your amygdala. Every time you say no to an immediate desire, you're not just showing character. You're initiating a cascade of processes that strengthen synaptic connections in your prefrontal cortex. This is strength training for the muscle of willpower. In just a minute, you'll see what this looks like on a brain scan. Dozens of studies at leading universities worldwide provide an unambiguous answer. You can physically rewire your brain. Meditation and Stoic practices are not just mental exercises for relaxation. That's merely the tip of the iceberg. The reality, captured on fMRI scans, is shocking. Individuals who regularly practice mindfulness show a physical thickening of gray matter in the prefrontal cortex. Your inner executive literally builds muscle mass. Simultaneously, there's a decrease in neuronal density and activity in the amygdala, your fear and anxiety center. Just 8 weeks of mindfulness practice, 27 minutes a day, lead to a measurable increase in gray matter density in the hippocampus. You're not just learning to be calmer, you're physically building a brain that is less reactive to stress. But how does abstaining from excess make you derive more pleasure from simple things than a millionaire from a new yacht? The secret lies in dopamine receptors. Why does a plain apple taste incredibly sweet after a week without sugar? This isn't just contrast, it's a fundamental neurobiological process. An excess of dopamine from constant stimuli causes the brain to reduce the number of receptors to protect itself from overstimulation. This is called downregulation. This process underlies every addiction, from narcotic to digital. Modern consumer society has broken our reward system. Asceticism and minimalism trigger the opposite process, upregulation. When you reduce the flow of stimuli, the brain, in order to detect weak signals, begins to grow new dopamine receptors, restoring their sensitivity. This is the neurobiological basis of Diogenes' freedom. The warmth of the sun was enough for him because his reward system was perfectly calibrated. We thought freedom was the ability to have everything, but science proves that freedom is the ability to need nothing. So, we have assembled all the pieces of the puzzle. We started by diagnosing the hedonic treadmill. We gained a tool for defense, the Stoics' inner citadel. We moved on to training with Diogenes' weapon and applied it through minimalism. We saw how this creates the paradox of social power. But now we see that the neurobiology of self-sufficiency is not just another element, but the physical foundation upon which all of this rests. These are not separate tricks, but a holistic operating system. Each element reinforces the other, creating a positive feedback loop. We have cracked the code. Now you have not just knowledge, but blueprints. In the concluding section, we will assemble these 6 elements into a single, step-by-step protocol. You have all the components. In the end, we will perform the assembly and deliver the verdict. Who are you, a king or a slave to your desires? Let's begin the assembly. The first connection: science and space. We link the trap of hedonic adaptation and the psychology of minimalism. Remember lottery winners. A year later, they are no happier than ordinary people. This is a law. When you understand this scientific fact, your attitude towards things changes. You get rid of the 300,000 items in your home not because it's trendy, but because you see in every new purchase not happiness, but another step on the treadmill to nowhere. Decluttering becomes an act of conscious rebellion against a biological trap. Instead of impulsive buying, you ask yourself, what level of dopamine will I get, and how quickly will it reset? You begin to value not the possession of a thing, but the freedom from the desire to possess it. But getting rid of external clutter is only half the battle. The second connection: the perfect balance of defense and attack. We combine the Stoics' inner citadel and Diogenes' weapon. These are 2 sides of the coin of invulnerability. The citadel, built on the dichotomy of control, is your air defense system. It teaches you not to waste energy on others' opinions or economic crises, but to focus on your reactions. Marcus Aurelius, writing his diary in a military tent on the icy frontier, demonstrated this system in action. But good defense is not enough. Diogenes' weapon, asceticism, is your special forces training. By voluntarily embracing small discomforts, you vaccinate your psyche against real difficulties. Life's blows are perceived not as a catastrophe, but as another training exercise. Stoicism protects you from unexpected blows, and asceticism makes you so strong that these blows become insignificant. Stoicism is your skeleton, a robust structure. Asceticism is your muscles, which you train so that blows are not even felt. The final, culminating connection. We link the neurobiology of self-sufficiency and the paradox of social power. This explains why charisma cannot be faked. Stoic practices and asceticism physically alter the brain. They strengthen the prefrontal cortex and normalize the dopamine system. This is an internal process. Your charisma is a direct reflection of the biochemistry of your free brain. When your brain is not in a state of needing approval or stimulation, your body non-verbally transmits calm and strength. People subconsciously read this as a sign of high status. Your social power is a side effect of your neurobiological freedom. Your inner freedom is like the invisible gravity of the moon. You don't see the force itself, but you see its undeniable manifestation. The tides in the behavior of people around you. The code of invulnerability is assembled. We have come to the end of this journey. Now, before you is a crossroads. 2 archetypes of power. Alexander the Great, a man who wanted to conquer the entire world to satisfy his desires. His strength lay in external expansion. Diogenes of Sinope, a man who conquered his desires and therefore needed nothing from the world. His strength lay in inner freedom. Who is the true symbol of strength for you? Alexander, capable of getting everything he wants, or Diogenes, who needs nothing the world can offer? One, the king of the world. The other, the king of himself. I ask you to make a choice. Write just one word in the comments: Alexander or Diogenes. This is not just participating in a poll, it is a declaration of your intention. It is the choice of your operating system. Your answer will determine your life strategy. There is no right or wrong answer, but there is your choice. Make it.